88% of enterprises are using AI in some capacity, but a large number say that their data infrastructure and readiness are not keeping pace. My name is Paul Nashawaty, and I'm the practice lead and principal analyst at the Cube Research, and I cover AppDev. Karthik from Yugabyte and Kirill from Azure Cosmos DB at Microsoft joins me today. Hey guys, how you doing?
Very good. How are you doing?
Great to have you here. Karthik, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Karthik, one of the co-founders and CEO at Yugabyte, and my journey has been pretty technical. Like before starting Yugabyte in early 2016, I was at Nutanix working on distributed block stores for the private cloud, and before that at Meta, where my team and we worked together on building databases like Apache Cassandra, Apache HBase, and the NoSQL databases. So that's a short background, and super excited to be here.
Awesome. And Kirill, how about you?
I'm Kirill Gavriluk. I lead Azure Cosmos DB here at Microsoft. I spent many years at Microsoft doing various things. I share the passion for NoSQL with Karthik, and worked on Cosmos DB for since its inception, and distributed systems and things of that nature.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you both here. I mean, it's really an exciting time, especially with AI and what we have going on in the market. But Karthik, let's talk about, we started with a deeply engaged database, distributed database, observability and resilience. That's kind of what you were talking about, your background, what we were talking before this. Observability is evolving rapidly, especially with enterprises demanding more automated insights and corrective actions. And Kirill, with DocumentDB's recent move to open source and the broader shifts to the Postgres ecosystem, the timing couldn't be more interesting, right? When we talk about this topic here. But let's explore the trends, especially when enterprises look towards moving towards auto remediation and how open source and the recent database moves really enable that, particularly with AI in the AI era. So I thought I would start by asking you both questions on these topics. So Karthik, let's start with you. When I think about why auto remediation matters now, right? In a world of always-on applications, what does what does database resiliency really mean? And is it just about uptime, or is it about surviving the unexpected workload shifts like AI queries?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. And I think the what you alluded to towards the end of that is at the crux of everything, which is what does it mean? What does resilience mean, right? Traditionally, when you talk about resilience and auto remediation, you think of something goes down and something else replaces it, and you can actually continue to run your workload. However, now, if you think about what's going on, we have compressed time and we're releasing features faster. We're building more into innovation. We have newer types of deployments. All of this is coming at the same time. So what this means is you have not only unexpected workloads and bursts and shifts and ebbs and tides. You also have the ability for people to make mistakes because they're moving faster, and you need to recover from those. You have your standard stuff, like for example upgrades or security patching, that are happening more often as well. And you're running all of this in a very cost-efficient infrastructure, which is commodity. That means there's actually degradation in performance, not outright outage, right? So when you package all these things up, you're looking at a plethora of things that you have to that the infrastructure and the software and the database has to really take care of architecturally, as opposed to doing it with humans in the loop, right? And that's because AI and everything that our industry is heading towards is speeding things up. So ultimately, in a nutshell, what I'd say is we're going from the days of resilience to the days of ultra resilience, where it's not just outages, it's about how do you ensure uptime, risk mitigation, etc., in this fast-paced era.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I think about our research and I think about when we talk about applications being developed, we see that application portability, 20% of respondents in our latest research indicated that it's critical that their applications are portable. 67% of respondents say it's very important to them. And that is about the ability to kind of move and shift those workloads, but it also means that that data set is the lifeline of the business, right? And I think that there's a big adoption here when it comes to building these new workloads and working these workloads into ways that support the business. And so, Kirill, when I look at why open source DocumentDB is such a big deal, DocumentDB recently joined the Linux Foundation, became open source, right? We saw that recently. But why is that important now, especially with the rise of AI and when we look at these new types of workloads? Why is it important now?
Oh, absolutely. So a lot is semi-structured data, right? And no SQL APIs, non-relational APIs take semi-structured data as the primary. That's why we invested in non-relational data, and we invested in DocumentDB. There is no, unfortunately, standard in the industry for non-relational data, like there is one for relational data, which is Postgres, right? Everyone uses Postgres and love Postgres. So we wanted to do the same for non-relational data. There is a very popular MongoDB API, but the source is closed source, belonged and owned and controlled by one company. DocumentDB, the goal is to provide open source, open standards. It is compatible with MongoDB API, but it is based on Postgres. And that's a very critical distinction because all the investment in Postgres ecosystem coming from Yugabyte, from Microsoft, from AWS, from Google, from all these companies, everyone bringing their best. All of that can be leveraged by DocumentDB to provide the robust, reliable, resilient offering on any of these stacks while providing the standards document-oriented non-relational API, perfect for semi-structured data that AI applications need.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, but I guess I have a question for both of you then when it comes to how these database moves are signaling these shifts in the market, right? And when we see a lot of action around, specifically around Postgres, like, for example, Databricks buying Neon, right? And Snowflake's buying Crunchy Data, right? What do these moves tell you about the way the databases are going, and how does that impact really what's going on with what you're both building? And Karthik, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, let's start with those two examples that you quoted, Paul. Like Databricks buying Neon and Snowflake buying Crunchy. I think the one thing that unequivocally that it does is tells everybody Postgres is becoming the standard, right? So we've been saying it for a while, and Kirill's been saying it for a while, but now there are more people that are joining the bandwagon and saying that this is actually the trend. Like Postgres is where people go to build applications. Postgres is becoming the interface for people to actually access their data, right? So that's one of the things it says. The second thing that it says is, data can live in different locations. It can live in the warehousing side. It can live on transactional databases. It can live in different places, but you need to bring it together, like with a standard interface, with a standard operating paradigm, etc. Right? If you take Kirill's story, like that he just talked about, of getting DocumentDB on top of Postgres, that kind of says the same thing too, right? Data can actually live in the Postgres side and get accessed as a standard API, we say a MongoDB API. So overall, when you look at where we're headed as an industry, right? Like if you look at databases and the way they evolve, there are distinct eras on why databases come up. Like initially, there were commercial databases like, say, Oracle and others, like in DB2, right? And then when the Web 2.0 explosion happened, you get databases like Postgres and MySQL, which were open source, and specifically MySQL with the LAMP stack, because the internet applications initially were not high value, and you couldn't afford to pay the commercial rates, right, in order to keep that data. And so those databases were born. When the mobile revolution happened, and when data explosion happened, you had the NoSQL databases come up, and specifically for mobile, you had MongoDB that became pretty popular, right? When cloud became a thing and became really popular, you needed a completely open technology that would work in any substrate, public, private, hybrid, whatever it is, right? And so Postgres started to rise. And now I think, and what Kirill's alluding to also is, like, now with AI kicking in and everything going so much faster, the consolidation is starting to become a trend, because everybody wants the API that is standard and easy to use to move faster, while the substrate becomes standardized as Postgres, so it's easier to operate, secure, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, but Kirill, I'll ask you the same question here. But when I think about the question, I also would like to talk to the audience about what does this mean about bridging the gap between your existing heritage environment and maybe moving towards a new approach? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. No, I think, look, wherever your data is now, you want to move it or make sure that it's available through the standard stack, because everyone in the industry is investing, as Karthik says, in Postgres. That is becoming the standard stack. Microsoft spent, I think, has the highest number of contributions to Postgres last year, and we're not the only ones, right? AWS, Google investing, Yugabyte investing, everyone is investing, and it's beauty. because now the standard stack is available for all form factors, whether your data is analytical, whether your data is operational, it's all coming through it. And I think that standardization is key. We believe that the distinction between the OLTP and analytical data is reducing. That's why we invested in databases and Fabric, for example, our analytical platform. And the same thing you're seeing in Databricks and by Snowflake. That's a trend, but everyone is investing in one stack. And then on top of it, we're building APIs that are perfect for specific workloads, whether it's the Postgres API or MongoDB API. As long as they're all set on one stack, everyone benefits.
All right, Kirill. So let's talk about this from a different perspective. I agree with you. I think that people are looking at standardizing on a stack. They also want those actionable insights. They want to have complete visibility. So this is where open source and observability, does it equal auto remediation? I mean, when we combine open source databases with observability tools, how close do we get to real auto remediation? I mean, does it still need to be, what still needs to happen to make it reliable and safe?
So from my side, I believe anything that application needs to take dependency on, that needs to be open source, right? So all the parameters, all the capabilities, declarative capabilities in the stack that provide the resiliency guarantees, that needs to be present in the API. That's why we are investing in the open source distributed version of the DocumentDB, distributed version of Postgres. Yugabyte is perfect example of distributed version of Postgres and with DocumentDB on top, providing distributed document API. Same thing exists on Microsoft stack, and we use it in our services. I think the specific ways how those primitives are implemented could, when provided by individual platforms, could differ, but it's important that the applications are portable, right? And so it's important that anything application takes dependency on can be moved from one infrastructure to the other without changing the application code. That's what developers want. That's what we are about.
Yeah, in our recent research, Karthik, I want to give you a chance to respond to that. But in our recent research, what we found is, these organizations are using 6 to 15 different tools. 75% of respondents said that they're using 6 to 15 different tools. So, Karthik, when you think about it from that perspective, about reducing the complexity, but also increasing the availability, what are your thoughts on this when it comes to auto remediation?
Yeah, I would say, I think my thesis is as follows, right? Like you talked about on one side, the standardization and the APIs, and on the other side about observability and auto remediation, right? So let's cut them apart for a second, right? The real value in standardizing on APIs is it increases velocity, right? If you think about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before the advent of the cloud, and I can tell you this if you think about it, because it actually happened at places like Meta, we would actually start building software and we'd immediately order our machines to run it on, even before we knew how many machines we really needed, because it would take 9 months to 1 year to actually procure the machines, to rack and stack them, to have them available, right? That cycle, when the cloud came out, got cut into minutes. It's not months and years, it's actually minutes. And you can't really build anything in minutes. So the entire approach got shifted into how can you get to velocity, right? And now when you go to AI, that makes it even faster because AI is able to build quicker. So the first important thing to realize is it is easy for any developer, for any organization to uptake and to use and leverage things that are standard rather than things that are different, right? And that's the power of the standard API, open source, all of that stuff. And then standardizing on Postgres also allows us to innovate. And that innovation, you don't have to learn it 6 times over for your 6 different tools. You can learn it once and leverage it quicker, right? The whole purpose of the second side of it, which is the auto remediation and observability, is that you're now moving into a very fast release cycle, ability to now do things you could not do before. Like, let's say there's an event that you're selling tickets for, there's an online event that you're streaming. Well, the number of people that are going to log in on the day right before the event is much, much larger than what happens after the event or the day after, right? So there's a huge ebb and flow, and we can actually respond to these things with the modern infrastructure. So the second piece around Auto-resilient, auto-remediated, and observable systems is about how can you handle these things? How can the system, and when you start increasing your footprint of number of machines running it, number of queries that you're serving, even though your probability of any failure happening is small, you've just increased in your exposure so much that you are going to have failures. And you can't have people jumping in and fixing things, because that not only decreases your revenue as a business, it also impacts your brand, because people are going to say, look, these guys don't know how to keep their services running, right? So these things start to matter, and that's the loop of systems automatically remediating things and people quickly getting to the bottom of what is it that I really need to fix, right? And so those two things work in tandem. So that's kind of the forces, the two sides of the coin that, if you will, that are happening. And so to put a pin on it, all your 6 to 7 to 8 tools that are happening are 6 to 7 to 8 sub teams and 6 to 7 to 8 streams of investment that people have to go into their own enterprises, which naturally reduces the business value, because unless you can say a couple of these tools are so different in what they accomplish, it's probably not worth doing, right? And that comes back to the other point as well. Like, if you have a Mongo API that's useful, but you can standardize on a Postgres stack, well, that's one less tool you have to worry about, because the pain of operationalizing things and securing it is far more than the pain of building it after you've released the software, right? So,
no, you're spot on. And that's where I was kind of getting to with the fact that it really, organizations, depending on where they are in their maturity and their journey, really can decide what is the tool stack. I mean, we found that 54% of those organizations are in favor of moving towards a unified approach, right? Exactly to your point, Karthik. So that's kind of where I think this is going. It's maturing to this model. Organizations are moving to this model. And to your point about the cadence of delivering applications, it's speeding up. We see that 24% of organizations are looking to release applications on an hourly basis. I mean, only 8% in that same survey, are able to do so because they run into all these challenges and they're not mature enough with all their different complexity and tools and different silos of what they're working on. But let's talk about getting ready for that AI workload, right? As AI kind of changes how companies are using data right now, with documents, with vectors and real-time needs, what should enterprise be doing now to prepare, and how should they think about open versus closed solutions in that journey? And Karthik, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so on the open versus closed, I would always bet on open. Like, that's just like, it's not even because we're open source as Yugabyte. We have a reason why we picked open source. It's because innovation of the world, of the entire industry, tends to outweigh the innovation of any one group, right? That's trying to innovate on it. That's number one. And number two, maybe, you can build as a commercial closed source software, you can build the perfect solution for a perfect need right now, right? The thing is, if it were open, people will try it and stretch it and move it in different ways and contribute to it. And over time, it starts to do more. And pretty soon, the closed commercial software starts to play catch up with the open source software, which becomes the true center of innovation, right? So open versus closed, I'd say always bet on open. And we're at a stage in AI specifically where we're trying to solve real business value problems, as opposed to doing AI, which is like figuring out what can AI do for you. It's a working for AI to figure out what it does. AI needs to now work for businesses to unlock business value, right? So that's kind of the state we're in. And the real barrier to adopting this is going to be modernizing your tech stack. You're really making sure that you're in a state where you can leverage they're ready, and as people figure out how to unlock value, you can put it in. So the principle to doing that is to build for change. We've always talked about an infrastructure build to last, right? That's kind of changing. That doesn't mean you just build some crappy stuff and every 6 months rewrite it. That's not the point. But it's equally not the point that you're building for the next 3 years, right? Because there's going to be iterations, and you have to figure out how different components are modular, pluggable, interchangeable. And so stick to standards, stick to open source, and get your things functional, and then think about what do the individual pieces mean, and do you want to go proprietary for a particular thing or not? So that'd be my broad take.
Yeah, that's a great response. Honestly, I really like I'm a huge advocate of open source because I think it makes a lot of sense. Kirill, let me give you a final thought here on what are your thoughts on this? Open versus closed. Where should AI workloads go? How is this going to move in the future?
Absolutely. So I do believe that enterprises should pick the open source stacks with the broadest ecosystem. That's one of the reasons why DocumentDB was built on top of Postgres, is because of the success of Postgres ecosystem. And because it's open and everyone contributes, and it's so extensible, That's what brings it. Because this way, when enterprise build an app, likely majority of the common infrastructure pieces are already there, already built by someone. And likely any recent latest innovations in, for example, vectors or re-ranking, etc., will be already built for Postgres or provide APIs for Postgres, and therefore will be available to either Postgres or DocumentDB. And so you can standardize on it and take advantage of the latest and greatest innovations out there. That's why we also kind of open source not only any primitives that application needs to take dependency on that we expose in our stack, we believe need to be open source, and we are open sourcing them, starting with DocumentDB and all the Postgres extensions, and including the vector, DiskNN, etc. All of this, we believe, to developing in the open, and then we can compete with others on the how fast remediation can happen inside the cloud, how fast can we, or how much lower cost we can bring for vectorization. But all the primitives in the stack needs to be open, and that's what enterprises should prioritize, is to bet on the open things.
Great response. Karthik, final word. What are your thoughts? We talked a lot here. Where can the audience go to learn more?
I think to learn more, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of resources in the industry, no shortage of it in the modern day. Like I'd say, like for us, we have a community Slack of over 10,000 people who come in and ask questions, very similar questions, all the way from the why and what should you do, all the way to more detailed questions about design. So, yugabyte.com/Slack, that's a great place. We're pretty active on, our LinkedIn channels as well. So those are some of the places to learn. And, your question on, what are people should do to get prepared for AI? I'd say it really comes down to recognizing one fundamental principle, which is when AI starts to do stuff for us, the speed goes up so much that it becomes exponential. And as humans, we're very bad at visualizing exponential. We don't know how to do that. We don't know what it would look like a couple of years or 3 years of exponential growth being subject to that. So, and it's not started yet. It's kind of in the kicking off stage. So the next 3 years are going to be critical in getting everybody to a state where they're ready for that kind of growth, right? So I'd say do that kind of, look at it from that perspective. How do you modernize? How do you get ready? How do you get into the cycle of faster releases and pluggable components, right? So that would be the main advice I'd give to the audience.
Certainly exciting times ahead for us, for all, right? Thank you both for joining me today, and thank you for being my guest for joining us on this podcast. And a big thank you to all of you who've tuned in. We really appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But that wraps up this episode. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another current conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. Whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social media. And if you have any other thoughts, questions, or just want to connect, you can always reach me at pauln@siliconangle.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay building. Thank you.